and we are here to think big. And we will start with Luís. And Luís is thinking big already because he will talk about how artificial intelligence is accelerating the search for new drugs. Luís Valente is the CEO is the CEO of iLof. He's also a Forbes 30 under 30, and he is an entrepreneur because he started his first company at the age of 18. Of course, that the background in computer science certainly helps. But over to you, Luís, and try to keep your presentation under 5 to 6 minutes because the whole idea here is to ask questions and put all of you answering to those questions, okay?
Absolutely, absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much, Hugo Souza and Hugo Chopina also for the kind invitation. I'll make sure to keep my my schedule, especially after so interesting presentations as we had in this morning. So I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully you're seeing something. Can you confirm, Hugo, that you're seeing my screen?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so this, as Hugo kindly introduced, this short talk will be to speak about some of the efforts that we are doing, of course, to accelerate the development and the search for new drugs, and how artificial intelligence can absolutely change the paradigm and the way things are done. But I want to start with a question. We all know what this is. We all got used to, especially our female audience got very used to it, and in the last few decades, it has become part of our day-to-day, and it's absolutely seen as a positive to harmless things. Of course, all medication have side effects, right? They all have unintended effects. But you think of side effects of anticonceptional drugs, you think of, well, pregnancy. I mean, if you don't take it right, or you may think nausea, or you may think, well, weight gain. And all of that is true. But what's also true is that there is a very clear side effect that is also very studied, and that it's while it's rare, it's also known to happen, and that is actually severe complications leading to eventually death. And it might sound striking, but this side effect, the severe conditions leading to death, they've been handlessly studied. So anticonceptional drugs, they can create clots in the blood. And more important than that, they can create clots on persons that have a biological profile that is already prone to clots. Of course, right now you have no way of knowing which person will be prone to clotting and will have their vessels blocked, and eventually have either a heart attack or a stroke. You have no way of knowing that. You just trust the numbers, and the numbers say that under 1 in 1,000 persons that use anticonceptional drugs, they develop clots. So we have learned to live with smaller risks. We have learned to live with side effects, mainly because it works for the majority of people. So anticonceptional drugs work for the majority of people, and we have learned to live with the risk. But unfortunately, that's not the case with all diseases. There are diseases that are very complex and they are very heterogeneous, and regardless of the side effects, the same drug doesn't even work for all. It just doesn't have any intended effect in the big majority of the population. And there are some complex heterogeneous diseases that are really suffering for that. And one, I think one of the big cases, it's actually Alzheimer's disease. So for the past 14 years, more than 400 clinical trials failed without any new treatment for this disease. And we all know the social tragedy behind it. So what's wrong? What's failing? And the truth is, Alzheimer's is a very heterogeneous disease. There is a poor biological knowledge, of course, behind it, but there is also a clear failure of the one fits all drug approach. So there's not going to be one drug that it work for everyone, regardless of any side effects. So in the last 14 years, as I mentioned, no treatment has approved, and the possibilities that the doctors have today are exactly the same they had 14 years ago. And so we need a new drug in the market, and we need our pharmaceutical companies, our biotechs, and our hospitals to get into this drug development process. But the clinical trials that are supposed to output a treatment for the disease, they have major issues. They're quite invasive, they're very difficult to access, and that causes 90% of the people initially enrolled into the clinical trials to drop out, and which also leads to massive costs to the way drugs are developed. So this is a clear example of a rare, of a complex, unfortunately not rare, but complex heterogeneous disease, for which many promising drugs are being abandoned because of development issues. And 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 this is the heart and soul of what we at iLof have been trying to solve um, with our platform. There is a big need for the use of innovative platforms. And one of them is, of course, what we normally call artificial intelligence, that we all know can be summarized as machine learning and deep learning. And there is a big need for using of these kinds of platforms for the development of personalized treatments. I could give examples of many platforms that are aiming to do so. I'll give the example of the iLof platform. And what the iLof platform is doing is it's using a photonics-based approach, so an approach based on light, on physics, to collect an optical fingerprint of the biological profile of the patient. It stores it in the cloud, that exact biological profile, and then by working directly with biotechs, with pharmaceutical groups worldwide, and by collecting massive amounts of data, it's able to correlate the biological profile to the right treatment being developed for the patient. This is done using a single blood sample. So as I mentioned before, some of these tools that I use, they're quite invasive, they are quite difficult to access, and blood really makes it much more convenient, much faster, and really much more flexible for the industry. The tool that we use, and not to get very deep into the science of it, but it's all based on an intelligent lab, on a fiber approach, where we basically convert a light signal that is resulting of the interaction of the light with the particle, with the nanoscale particles and fluids, and using that backscatter pattern that we get from shining a very focused laser into a blood sample, we are able to create these very accurate fingerprints of each biological profile. We connect it with the drugs being developed, and we're able to generate insights about the right patients for each clinical trial, and hopefully the right patients for each drug. And again, this is not to get very technical, but there's 4 different dimensions of how artificial intelligence is helping this phenotyping, this biological phenotyping. It all, of course, starts by the nanoscale particles that are flowing in our bloodstream, by getting their signal, by converting that optical signal into, of course, an electrical time and frequency signal, and then using AI models to do amazing things like biomarker detection, quantification, or very complex patient stratification. This is just a snippet of some of the work that we have in junction with world partners from Australia to the US to the UK, that we have been developing. Um, and there are 3 things that are very important to accelerate the development of personalized treatments for rare heterogeneous diseases like Alzheimer. Number one is biomarker detection. A lot of drugs will only work if a patient have a specific marker, a specific biomarker. The second thing is disease profiling. It's important to understand that sometimes it's not widely known exactly why a patient has that specific profile. So the biomarkers behind it are not widely known, but if you can get a large sample of the data of the patients that have that profile, you can in a way find the common denominator and brute force your way into creating a disease profile. And this is something that we have done with Alzheimer and mild cognitive impairment, and also disease prognosis. And here we see an example of a great project that was just finalized in junction with St. John's Hospital, with Hospital São João, with the Faculty of Medicine of University of Porto, and in Tech, where we were able on a proof of concept to predict how the patient will not react differently to a drug, as in the other two use cases, but act differently to the COVID-19 infection. Some patients, they got very ill, some get mild symptoms. And by getting their biological profile, we're able to predict that 15 days in advance, how the patient will react.
Just 1 minute to start wrapping up, please.
Of course, of course. The impact for this kind of platforms, it all starts by finding the right patients for clinical trials, for the development of these new drugs. There is a need for tools that make it cheaper and faster. And just in Alzheimer's clinical trials alone, the value proposition is very clear. Right now, 80% of the patients are discarded from the development of these personalized therapeutics. And that leads to a lot of costs and a lot of inconvenient and useless testing. Again, 80% of the patients are discarded during the trial for not having the right biological profile. And basically what a platform like iLof aims to do is really to stratify, to filter through the patients on an initial stage, to bring more people into the diagnostical funnel, leading to a much more patient-centric trial and to the deceleration of the development of the new drug. The potential for impact is huge. Just the top 4 pharmaceutical groups today, 2 of them we're working currently right now. They spend over 400 million a year screening for Alzheimer's clinical trials alone. And unfortunately, this is not a problem specific for Alzheimer. There are many heterogeneous diseases for which treatments have been failing because one treatment will not work for all. So there is a big need for a validated platform technology to use AI to accelerate the development and use of personalized treatments. So they say that a good life is a collection of happy memories. And I would like to invite you all to join us in our journey to preserve Alzheimer's patients' memories around the globe, and really understand that the only way we can fight this epidemic is through innovative, transformative platforms. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Luís. Inspiring and clearly entrepreneurial. I can see that you are used to pitch this quite often. And I have a few questions for you later.